The meeting room on New Harmony Station buzzed with the usual mix of alien voices and translator static. Commander Lisa Matthews sat quietly at the human delegation table, her hands folded neatly in front of her as she listened to the debate raging around the circular chamber. The Galactic Coalition had been arguing about the same border dispute for 3 hours now, and nothing had been decided. Zarathiel watched the human woman from across the room with growing curiosity. The Elven ambassador had served on New Harmony for 2 decades, long enough to observe how different species behaved during these endless political sessions. The Saurians, like Kexavara, would pound their clawed fists on tables and roar their displeasure. The crystalline beings from Arcturus would literally change colors when agitated, shifting from cool blues to angry reds. Even her own people, the elves of the Silver Moon Confederation, would gesture dramatically and raise their voices when frustrated. But the humans never did any of that. They just sat there, calm and patient, taking notes on their data tablets, and occasionally whispering to each other in voices so low that even her enhanced elven hearing could barely catch the words. It was unnatural, Zarathiel thought. Every species in the galaxy had tells when they were angry or upset. Every species except humanity. Kexavara slammed his massive-scaled hand down on the table again, making several smaller delegates jump in, their seats. The Saurian military advisor was nearly 8 feet tall when standing, with teeth like daggers and claws that could tear through steel plating. His yellow eyes swept the room with obvious contempt as he spoke. "This is why the void. Hunters continue to push into our space," Kexavara hissed, his forked tongue flicking out between words. "We waste time with endless talk while they take what they want through strength. The coalition has become weak and soft, led by species that know nothing of real war." His gaze lingered on the human delegation as he said the last part. Lisa Matthews looked up from her tablet and met his stare without flinching. She did not speak, did not react, just looked at him with those calm gray eyes that seemed to see everything and reveal nothing. The Saurian laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Look at them. The humans send their little diplomats to discuss galactic security while their entire military could not defeat a single Saurian battlecruiser. They hide behind the coalition's protection like children behind their parents." Some of the other delegates shifted uncomfortably. Everyone knew that. Humanity's military contribution to coalition defense was minimal compared to the major powers. Earth had exactly 12 ships assigned to patrol duty, all of them listed as research or exploration vessels. Their weapons were described as defensive only in official reports. The humans claimed they preferred to contribute through engineering, medicine, and diplomatic services rather than warfare. Zarathiel watched Lisa Matthews carefully during Kexavara's insults. The human woman's expression did not change at all. She simply returned her attention to her tablet and continued taking notes as if nothing had been said. But something about that perfect calm made the elf feel cold inside. In all her years of diplomatic service, she had learned that the most dangerous beings were often the ones who showed no emotion at all. The debate continued for another hour before finally breaking for recess. As delegates filed out of the chamber in small groups, Zarathiel approached the human table. Lisa Matthews was gathering her materials while her aide, a younger woman named Amy Roberts, checked messages on a communication device. "Commander Matthews," Zarathiel said softly, "I wanted to apologize for Advisor Kexavara's comments. His words were inappropriate and uncalled for." Lisa looked up with a small smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "Thank you, Ambassador Zarathiel. But no apology is necessary. Everyone is entitled to their opinions about humanity's capabilities." There was something in the way she said capabilities that made Zarathiel's skin crawl. The word sounded perfectly normal, perfectly diplomatic, but underneath it, the elf sensed something vast and dark moving in deep water. "Your people have contributed greatly to the coalition," Zarathiel continued, trying to understand what she was sensing. "Your medical advances alone have saved millions of lives across dozens of worlds." "We do what we can," Lisa replied simply. "Humanity believes in helping others whenever possible." Amy Roberts looked up from her device, her face suddenly serious. "Commander, we're receiving a priority message from Earth Command. It's marked urgent." Lisa's calm expression did not waver, but Zarathiel noticed that her hands had gone completely, still on the table. Thank you, Captain Roberts. We'll review it in our quarters. The two human women gathered their belongings and left the chamber without another word. Zarathiel watched them go, noting how they moved with purpose now instead of their usual unhurried pace. Something had changed in those few seconds. Something important. Across the room, Kexvara was holding court with several other military advisors, his voice carrying clearly in the high-ceilinged space. "Mark my words," he was saying. "The next species the Void Hunters target will fold immediately if they choose soft prey. Humans, perhaps, or those weak plant beings from the outer rim. Any species that has forgotten how to fight deserves whatever happens to them." The other advisors laughed and agreed. They began discussing which worlds would be easiest for raiders to attack, rating different species by their perceived military strength. Humanity ranked near the bottom of every list. Zarathiel left the chamber feeling deeply troubled. Something was wrong with this picture, but she could not put her finger on what it was. The humans acted like a species that had never known conflict, yet they had unified their entire planet and achieved faster-than-light travel in record time. They built cities that could house millions and space stations that rivaled anything in Coalition space. Those accomplishments required organization, planning, and resources on a massive scale. So why did they seem so helpless when it came to military matters? And why did that helplessness feel like the most dangerous thing in the galaxy? Later that evening, reports would begin filtering in from the border regions. A human colony called Eden's Rest had missed its scheduled check-in. Long-range sensors detected no activity in the system. All attempts at communication had failed. But none of that had happened yet. For now, the galaxy continued to see humanity as the peaceful builders, the quiet diplomats, the species that contributed just enough to earn their place at the table, but not enough to be taken seriously by the real powers. That was about to change forever. The emergency session began 18 hours after Eden's Rest went silent. Coalition rescue ships had reached the human colony to find something that made even hardened military officers struggle to file their reports. The briefing room on New Harmony Station was packed with delegates from every major species as Admiral Vorthon of the Coalition fleet displayed the footage on the main screen. Zarathiel felt sick as she watched the recordings from the rescue teams. Eden's Rest had been home to 50,000 humans, mostly families who had volunteered to establish humanity's newest farming colony. The settlement had been known for its peaceful nature and its willingness to trade with any species that passed through their system. Now it was nothing but burned buildings and empty streets. The rescue teams had found evidence of systematic destruction, but worse than that were the signs of what had happened to the colonists. Detention facilities had been hastily constructed. Medical equipment showed traces of biological experiments. The few survivors they found were in such poor condition that most could not even speak coherently. Dr. Maya Foster had been the colony's lead scientist, a woman who specialized in alien biology and had spent her career studying how different species could work together. The rescue team found her in what appeared to be a makeshift laboratory, barely alive and missing parts of her body that had been surgically removed. Her final recorded message was a simple plea for someone to warn Earth that the attackers had been asking detailed questions about human anatomy and military capabilities. Lisa Matthews sat in the front row of the briefing room, her hands folded in her lap as she had during yesterday's border dispute meeting. But Zarathiel could see something different about the human commander now. Her breathing was too controlled, too precise, like someone fighting very hard to maintain composure. When the medical reports were read aloud, describing the torture and experimentation performed on human children, Lisa's face became completely blank in a way that made Zarathiel's blood freeze. Admiral Vorthion finished his presentation and opened the floor for discussion. The response was predictably political and useless. Representative after representative stood up to offer sympathy and condolences, but when it came time to discuss action, the familiar excuses began flowing. "While this tragedy is certainly regrettable," announced the crystalline delegate, his body shifting to cautious yellow, "the attack occurred outside Coalition patrol routes. We cannot set a precedent of military intervention in independent systems." Kexvara nodded his massive head in agreement. "The Void Hunters have been raiding border worlds for generations. It is unfortunate that the humans chose to settle in such a dangerous area without adequate protection." Several other delegates murmured their agreement. The plant beings from Verdania suggested that perhaps humanity should consider relocating their outer colonies to safer regions. The aquatic depths dwellers recommended improved early warning systems rather than military response. Through it all, Lisa Matthews said nothing. She simply sat and listened as the galaxy's representatives explained why nothing could be done about the systematic torture and murder of 50,000 human civilians. Zarathiel watched the human woman's face and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's climate controls. When the formal discussion period ended, Lisa finally stood and requested permission to address the assembly. Admiral Vorth An granted her 2 minutes to make a statement on behalf of humanity. "Thank you," Lisa said, her voice perfectly calm and professional. "The human delegation would like to formally request a coalition military response to this unprovoked attack on civilian targets. We have evidence that the Void Hunters specifically targeted Eden's Rest because they believed human colonists would be unable to defend themselves." She paused and looked around the room, meeting the eyes of delegates from every major species. "We are prepared to contribute whatever resources the coalition requires for a joint operation to ensure this never happens again." The silence that followed lasted exactly 15 seconds. Then Kexvara laughed, the same grinding metal sound he had made during yesterday's meeting. "And what exactly would humanity contribute to such an operation?" the Saurian asked mockingly. "Your 12 research vessels? Your defensive-only weapons? Perhaps you could negotiate the Void Hunters to death with strongly worded diplomatic protests." More laughter rippled through the chamber. Even delegates who had expressed sympathy for the human losses seemed amused by the idea of Earth's tiny fleet taking action against the notorious raiders. Lisa nodded slowly, as if she had expected this response. "I see. In that case, the human delegation formally requests a vote on coalition military intervention." "Granted," Admiral Vorthon said. "All in favor of military action against Void Hunter forces?" 3 hands were raised. The Elven delegation surprisingly voted in favor. So did the Verdanians and one of the smaller insectoid species. Everyone else voted against intervention or abstained. "Motion fails," the Admiral announced. "The coalition will increase patrols in border regions and issue a formal condemnation of the attack, but no military action will be taken at this time." Lisa stood again. "Thank you for your consideration. The human delegation requests permission to return to Earth for consultation with our government regarding future colony protection measures." "Granted," Vorthon replied. "Please convey our deepest sympathies to your people." The session ended, and delegates began filing out of the briefing room. Zarathiel tried to catch Lisa's attention, but the human commander was already leaving. With her aide, Amy Roberts. Both women moved with that same purposeful stride she had noticed yesterday, but now there was something else in their bearing, something that reminded the elf of predators who had just caught the scent of prey. That night, Zarathiel noticed something strange. All the human personnel who normally worked on New Harmony Station seemed to have disappeared. The diplomatic quarter where they maintained offices was dark and empty. When she asked about it, station security told her that the humans had requested emergency leave to return to Earth for family reasons related to the Eden's Rest tragedy. It made sense, but something about it felt wrong. Humans had been attacked before, though never on such a scale. They had never pulled all their people out of Coalition space in response to previous incidents. 2 days later, the first reports started coming in from the border regions. 3 separate Void Hunter fleets had gone missing in the space of 48 hours. Not destroyed, not defeated in battle, just gone. Their last communications had been routine patrol reports and then nothing. No distress signals, no debris. Fields, no trace of what had happened to over 200 ships and 30,000 raiders. Kexvara dismissed the reports as navigation errors or equipment failures. Void Hunters were notorious for poor maintenance and outdated technology, but Zarathiel found herself thinking about Lisa Matthews's perfectly calm face as she listened to descriptions of human children being tortured for scientific curiosity. The third day, a single message was broadcast simultaneously to every coalition member world, every military installation, and every diplomatic facility in known space. It was brief, professional, and delivered in Lisa Matthews's steady voice. The Galactic Coalition has voted that the systematic torture and murder of 50,000 human civilians does not warrant military response. We tried diplomacy. Earth will now handle this matter through alternative means. Any species or organization providing aid, comfort, or sanctuary to Void Hunter forces will be considered hostile to human interests. This message will not be repeated. The transmission ended, and was not followed by any explanation or elaboration. When Coalition Command tried to contact Earth for clarification, they received only automated responses stating that human diplomatic channels were temporarily suspended pending resolution of current security concerns. In the Outer Rim territories, where Void Hunter bases operated, something was moving through the darkness between stars. Ships that did not appear on any registry, using technology that Coalition sensors could not properly identify, began appearing on the edges of Raider-controlled space. Velandra, the most successful Void Hunter war chief in recent memory, received reports of these mysterious contacts with growing confusion. Her scouts described vessels that seemed to absorb sensor pings rather than reflecting them, ships that moved without visible engines, and weapons signatures unlike anything in the Coalition database. But she had led successful raids for over a decade, and was not easily frightened. The humans were weak, everyone knew that. Their tiny fleet was a joke compared to her battle-hardened raiders. If they wanted to play at war, she would be happy to teach them the difference between diplomatic protests and real violence. That confidence would last exactly 6 more days. Nyxera had always prided herself on being the most thorough military analyst in the Silver Moon Confederation. As head of Elven Strategic Intelligence, she made it her business to know the capabilities and weaknesses of every major species in Coalition space. That was why the reports from the Outer Rim were driving her to distraction. 6 Void Hunter fleets had now vanished without explanation. Not just disappeared, but completely erased from existence with no evidence of what had destroyed them. The latest incident had occurred near the Kepler Nebula, where War Chief Velandra's personal fleet of 47 ships had been conducting routine raiding operations against merchant vessels. The Coalition monitoring station at Kepler had detected the Void Hunter ships on long-range sensors at 14:30 Standard Time. At 14:32, every single contact had simultaneously vanished from all tracking systems. When the patrol ship arrived to investigate 6 hours later, they found empty space. No debris, no energy signatures, no trace that nearly 50 ships and 15,000 raiders had ever existed. This was impossible according to everything Nyxera knew about space warfare. Even if some unknown weapon could destroy entire fleets, instantly there should be evidence. Wreckage, radiation, something to indicate what had happened. But there was nothing, as if the ships had simply been erased from reality. The analyst pulled up her files on human military capabilities and spread them across her workstation's multiple screens. According to Coalition intelligence, Earth maintained a total fleet of 12 vessels. All were classified as research or exploration ships with minimal armament. The humans had no known weapons development programs, no major shipyards, and no military academies comparable to other spacefaring species. Yet something was systematically eliminating the most feared raiders in the galaxy, and the timing suggested it was connected to the attack on Eden's Rest. Nyxera began digging deeper into human records, looking for anything that might explain the discrepancy between official capabilities and apparent results. What she found made her question everything she thought she knew about humanity. The humans had achieved planetary unification in 2156, ending the last of their major wars through a combination of overwhelming force and diplomatic pressure. But the official histories were strangely vague about the details of that final conflict. References to weapons systems and military units were heavily redacted or missing entirely from public records. More concerning was the timeline of human space expansion. According to their own reports, they had developed faster-than-light travel in 2203 and established their first interstellar colony in 2208. But sensor records from that period showed unexplained energy signatures throughout their home system. Dating back to 2195, 8 years before they supposedly invented FTL technology, Nyxera cross-referenced shipping manifests and found more anomalies. Human cargo vessels regularly carried loads that were significantly heavier than their declared contents. Mining operations in the Sol system extracted far more raw materials than their colonies could possibly require for civilian construction. And there were persistent gaps in their communication schedules that suggested regular contact with locations outside known human space. The analyst sat back in her chair as the implications hit her. The humans had been lying about their capabilities for decades, possibly centuries. While presenting themselves as peaceful researchers and diplomats, they had been building something in secret, something large enough to require massive resource allocation and advanced enough to make entire fleets disappear without a trace. Her investigation was interrupted by an urgent communication from Ambassador Zarathiel on New Harmony Station. The elven diplomat appeared on the screen looking deeply troubled. "Nixera, I need you to review the tactical analysis of recent Void Hunter disappearances. Something is very wrong here." "I'm already working on it," the analyst replied. "What have you observed?" "The timing is too precise to be coincidental. Every fleet that has vanished was either directly involved in the Eden's Rest attack or provided logistical support to the raiders who carried it out. Someone is hunting them systematically," Nixera nodded grimly. "And that someone has access to weapons technology that makes our most advanced warships look like primitive rockets. Zarathiel, I think we have been catastrophically wrong about human military capabilities." The ambassador's expression grew even more serious. "There's something else. I've been monitoring coalition communication networks, and several other species have reported similar concerns. The Crystalline Assembly believes their secure channels have been compromised. The Saurian Empire has detected unidentified contacts near their border systems. Even the Depths dwellers are reporting anomalous sensor readings in their territory." "How long has this been going on?" "That's the disturbing part. Now that people are paying attention, the reports go back years, possibly decades. It's as if someone has been watching all of us for a very long time." Nixera felt a chill as she considered the implications. "Zarathiel, I need you to do something for me. Try to contact Commander Lisa Matthews or any other human representative. I have a terrible feeling that we're about to discover what happens when you back a predator into a corner." The ambassador's attempts to reach human diplomatic channels met with the same automated responses that had been frustrating Coalition Command for days. All human personnel had been recalled from Coalition facilities. All diplomatic communications were suspended pending resolution of security concerns. Any requests for clarification were met with polite but firm redirection to previous announcements. It was professional, efficient, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. On the 7th day after the last Void Hunter fleet disappeared, long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures approaching Velandra's primary stronghold in the Arcturus Void. The raider base was built inside a hollowed-out asteroid and defended by automated weapon platforms, mine fields, and a garrison fleet of over 100 ships. Coalition observers watched in disbelief as the attacking force emerged from the darkness between stars. Ships unlike anything in known databases, moving in perfect formation with no visible engine signatures or energy emissions. They approached the heavily defended base without haste, ignoring the frantic communications from Velandra's forces. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted exactly 17 minutes. The mysterious attackers made no attempt to communicate or negotiate. They simply began systematically dismantling the asteroid base's defenses with weapons that seemed to bend the laws of physics. Energy beams that curved around obstacles to strike targets in perfect cover. Projectiles that passed through shields as if they were not there. Some kind of field effect that caused entire sections of the base to simply stop working. When it was over, Velandra's stronghold was a lifeless hunk of rock drifting in space. Every ship, every weapon platform, every raider who had called the base home was gone. But unlike the previous attacks, this time the mysterious fleet left something behind. A single communication was broadcast on all frequencies, delivered in the same calm professional tone that had become terrifyingly familiar to Coalition intelligence analysts. "Velandra of the Void Hunters, you are hereby summoned to surrender yourself and all remaining forces under your command. You have 72 hours to comply. Any attempts to flee Coalition space or attack civilian targets will result in immediate termination of your fleet and all associated personnel. This message will not be repeated." The transmission included detailed coordinates for a rendezvous point in neutral space, along with specific instructions for how the surrender was to be conducted. The level of detail and tactical knowledge required to plan such an operation suggested intelligence-gathering capabilities that spanned decades. On New Harmony Station, Zarathiel and the other remaining delegates watched the recordings in stunned silence. The ambassador turned to her aide, a young elf named Lyra Menth, who served as liaison to the Coalition Military Command. "Send a priority message to the Silver Moon High Council," Zarathiel said quietly. "Tell them that we need to completely reassess our relationship with humanity. We have been sharing space with apex predators and treating them like domesticated pets." Lyra Menth's face had gone pale as she processed the tactical data. "Ambassador, based on the energy readings from those weapons, I don't think any coalition fleet could stand against them. If the humans decided to turn hostile, we would have no way to stop them." "Then we had better hope they continue to prefer diplomacy," Zarathiel replied, "because something tells me that mask of peaceful cooperation was the only thing standing between the galaxy and this." Across the coalition, military analysts were reaching the same terrifying conclusion. Humanity had not been hiding their weakness, they had been hiding their strength. And now that the facade was gone, everyone was about to learn what the galaxy's most dangerous species looked like when they stopped pretending to be harmless. Velandra had ruled the Void Hunters through strength and cunning for 15 years, but as she stared at the tactical displays showing the complete destruction of her primary base, she felt something she had never experienced before. Fear. The war chief stood in the command center of her flagship, surrounded by her most trusted lieutenants and the survivors of what had once been the most feared raider fleet in the Outer Rim. 47 ships had been reduced to 12 in less than a week. Her network of bases and supply depots had been systematically eliminated. And worst of all, she had no idea how it was being done. "War Chief," reported her chief navigator, a scarred veteran named Grixoth. "We have received responses from our allies in the hegemony sectors. They are willing to provide sanctuary and military support against these unknown attackers." Velandra nodded slowly. The hegemony was a loose alliance of aggressive species who operated outside coalition space, raiding and conquering weaker civilizations. If she could reach their territory, she might be able to rebuild her forces and plan a proper counterattack against whoever was hunting her people. "Set course for the hegemony border," she commanded. "Maximum speed. We will not surrender to these cowards who hide in darkness." But even as she gave the order, Velandra knew she was afraid. The attacks had been too precise, too coordinated. Someone had been studying her forces for a long time, learning their patterns and weaknesses. The systematic elimination of her fleet suggested an intelligence network that had penetrated her organization at the highest levels. The Void Hunter ships engaged their faster-than-light drives and fled toward the edge of Coalition space. Behind them, long-range sensors detected new contacts emerging from the void. Ships that had been waiting, watching, ready to pursue. The chase lasted 18 hours across 3 star systems. Velandra's fleet ran at maximum speed, pushing their engines beyond safe limits in a desperate attempt to reach friendly territory. But their pursuers matched them move for move, maintaining perfect distance while transmitting the same calm message every 6 hours. "Velandra of the Void Hunters, you have violated the terms of surrender and are now considered a hostile force. In active flight. Terminate your escape attempt and prepare for boarding, or your fleet will be destroyed in 60 seconds. Each time the message was transmitted, Velandra ordered her ships to ignore it and continue running. Each time, exactly 60 seconds later, one of her vessels would simply vanish from all sensors. Not destroyed in a burst of fire and debris, but erased as completely as if it had never existed. By the time they reached the hegemony border, only 3 ships remained from her once mighty fleet. Velandra's flagship and 2 escort vessels limped into the Korthak system, where a hegemony battle group waited to provide protection. Admiral Zektar of the Korthak Navy was a massive reptilian warrior whose species had conquered 17 worlds through superior firepower and ruthless tactics. He commanded 43 heavy cruisers and considered himself more than capable of dealing with whatever had been hunting the Void Hunters. "So," Zektar rumbled as Velandra's battered ships took position behind his fleet, "these mysterious humans think they can intimidate the hegemony. Let them come. We will show them how real warriors fight." The human ships appeared 6 hours later, emerging from hyperspace in perfect formation just outside the Korthak system's defensive perimeter. Admiral Zektar studied the sensor readings with growing confusion. The enemy fleet numbered only 24 vessels, barely half the size of his own force. Their ships were sleek and angular, with no visible weapons ports or engine signatures. "Attention. Hegemony vessels," came the now familiar calm voice over all communication channels. "You are harboring fugitive raiders responsible for the systematic torture and murder of human civilians. Surrender Vel Andra and her remaining forces immediately, or be classified as hostile combatants." Zektar laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "Unknown vessels. This is Admiral Zektar of the Korthak Navy. You have entered hegemony space without authorization. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The response came back without delay, still delivered in that same professional tone that had become the stuff of nightmares across Coalition space. "Admiral Zektar, you have 60 seconds to comply with surrender demands. Any attempt to engage human forces will result in the complete destruction of your fleet." The Korthak Admiral's massive fists slammed down on his command console. No one threatened the hegemony and lived to boast about it. "All ships attack formation, target the lead vessels, and prepare to show these upstart humans what real firepower looks like." The hegemony fleet opened fire with everything they had. Particle beams, plasma cannons, kinetic projectiles, and fusion warheads filled the space between the two forces with enough destructive energy to sterilize a planet. It was a display of coordinated firepower that had broken the resistance of countless worlds. Every shot missed. The human ships moved through the barrage like dancers avoiding raindrops, their vessels flowing around incoming fire with impossible grace. Some weapons seemed to pass right through them without causing damage. Others were deflected by invisible barriers that bent energy beams back toward their sources. Then the humans returned fire. Zektar had seen weapons from dozens of different species, from primitive chemical explosives to exotic matter disruptors. But what the human ships unleashed defied every principle of physics he understood, beams of coherent energy that curved through space to strike targets hiding behind asteroids, projectiles that passed through shields and armor as if they were not there. Some kind of field effect that caused entire sections of his ships to simply shut down, their crews falling unconscious at their stations. The battle lasted exactly 11 minutes. When it was over, the Korthak fleet was drifting helplessly. In space, their weapons offline and their engines dead. Not destroyed, but completely neutralized with surgical precision that left life support systems intact while eliminating all combat capability. Admiral Zektar found himself staring at a communication screen showing a human woman he had never seen before. She appeared to be in her 40s, with short brown hair and the same unsettling calm that marked all human military personnel. "Admiral Zektar," she said in a voice that carried absolute authority. "I am Admiral Diana Cross of the Earth Defense Force. Your fleet has been disabled but not destroyed as a demonstration of human capabilities. You will order your vessels to maintain position while we retrieve the fugitive raiders you attempted to protect." The massive reptilian warrior looked around his command center at the unconscious forms of his bridge crew, then back at the human admiral on his screen. "What did you do to my people?" "Non-lethal neural disruptor. They will recover in approximately 2 hours with no lasting effects." "Admiral, I want you to understand something very clearly. This engagement used less than 3% of my fleet's actual combat capability. We disabled your ships without killing a single member of your crew because humanity prefers to avoid unnecessary casualties." Diana Cross leaned forward slightly, and Zektar felt something cold crawl up his spine. "But if you or any other hegemony forces interfere with human operations again, we will demonstrate what happens when we stop being merciful. Do I make myself clear?" The Korthak Admiral nodded slowly, his earlier arrogance completely gone. "Crystal clear, Admiral Cross." "Excellent. Please convey our regards to your government and inform them that humanity will be establishing a permanent presence in this sector to ensure compliance with galactic laws regarding civilian protection." Human boarding shuttles approached Velandra's ships, and the Void Hunter war chief knew her reign of terror was over. But as she watched the sleek vessels dock with her flagship, she found herself wondering about something that chilled her to the bone. If this was what happened when humans decided to be merciful, what would they do to enemies who offered no quarter? She was about to find out. The interrogation rooms on the human ships were clean, well-lit, and completely terrifying in their efficiency. Valandra sat across from a human woman who introduced herself as Colonel Sarah Blake, and slowly learned exactly how long humanity had been watching her people. They knew everything, every raid, every base, every ally who had provided support to Void Hunter operations. They had detailed files on her personal history, her tactical preferences, even her favorite foods. The humans had been building intelligence networks throughout the galaxy for decades, watching and waiting while everyone dismissed them as harmless diplomats. "The question now," Colonel Blake said calmly, "is what happens to the survivors of your organization. That depends entirely on how cooperative you choose to be." Valandra looked into the human woman's eyes and saw something that made her understand why entire fleets had vanished without a trace. Behind that professional demeanor was something vast and patient, and absolutely without mercy for those who harmed innocents. The war was over. Humanity had won before it had even begun. 6 months after the first Void Hunter fleet disappeared, President Linda Gray stood before the Galactic Coalition Assembly for the first time in her political career. The leader of Earth had never found it necessary to address the galaxy personally before, leaving such matters to professional diplomats like Lisa Matthews. But the galaxy had changed, and so had humanity's role in it. The same chamber where Kex Vara had mocked human military capabilities was now filled with delegates who sat in absolute silence as the president took her place at the podium. Every species representative was present, even those who normally sent junior officials to coalition meetings. Today, everyone wanted to hear what the leader of humanity had to say. Zarathiel watched from the Elven delegation section, noting how different the atmosphere felt compared to 6 months ago. The casual arrogance that had marked previous sessions was gone, replaced by a careful politeness that bordered on fear. Even Kex Vara, who had survived the political fallout from his species' alliance with the Void Hunters, sat quietly with his clawed hands folded in his lap. President Gray was a woman in her 60s, with silver hair and the same unnaturally calm demeanor that seemed to characterize all human leaders. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the chamber, without any need for amplification or dramatic gestures. "Members of the Galactic Coalition," she began, "I come before you today to address the events of the past 6 months and to clarify humanity's position going forward." She paused and looked around the room, meeting the eyes of delegates from every major species. "When our colony at Eden's Rest was attacked, we followed proper diplomatic channels. We presented evidence of war crimes, requested coalition support, and waited patiently for justice to be served through established procedures." The president's tone remained perfectly professional, but something in her words made Zarathiel's skin crawl. "The coalition voted that the systematic torture and murder of 50,000 human civilians did not warrant military intervention. You told us that our people's suffering was an unfortunate border incident outside your jurisdiction." Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The crystalline representative had turned a pale shade of blue that indicated deep anxiety. Even the usually confident depths dwellers seemed to have difficulty maintaining their composure. "So humanity took responsibility for protecting our own people," President Gray continued. "The results speak for themselves. The Void Hunter organization has been completely dismantled. All surviving raiders have been transferred to appropriate detention facilities where they will face trial for their crimes. Their bases, ships, and weapon stockpiles have been eliminated." She activated a holographic display that showed the current state of the Outer Rim territories. Where Void Hunter strongholds had once posed a constant threat to civilian shipping, new installations now maintained order. Clean, efficient structures that bore the distinctive angular design of human military architecture. These facilities will serve as permanent monitoring stations to ensure that no similar organization can threaten innocent civilians in the future. They are staffed by personnel from the Earth Defense Force and equipped with whatever resources are necessary to maintain galactic security. Ambassador Helen Carter, who had replaced Lisa Matthews as humanity's primary diplomatic representative, stood up in the human delegation section. She was younger than her predecessor, with red hair and green eyes that seemed to see everything. But she had the same unsettling calm that marked all human officials. "The coalition has asked for clarification regarding Earth's military capabilities," Carter said smoothly. We are prepared to provide a complete briefing on human defense assets, including detailed specifications of our fleet strength, weapons technology, and operational parameters. She activated her own holographic display, and the chamber fell into stunned silence as the true scope of humanity's military might was revealed. Hundreds of ships that had never appeared on any coalition registry, weapons systems that operated on principles decades ahead of anything other species had developed, industrial capacity that dwarfed the combined output of most coalition members. These assets have been maintained in reserve for over 2 centuries, Carter explained. Humanity has always believed that the best way to ensure peace is to be prepared for war while hoping never to need it. Keksavara finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "How long have you been watching us?" President Gray answered the question directly. "Since first contact. We have monitoring stations throughout coalition space, intelligence networks in every major government, and detailed tactical assessments of all military forces in known space. This information was gathered for defensive purposes and has never been used to threaten or coerce any peaceful species." The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. Humanity had been studying them all for generations, learning their strengths and weaknesses while presenting themselves as harmless researchers. Every military secret, every political alliance, every strategic weakness had been carefully catalogued by beings everyone had dismissed as weak. "Why?" asked the Verdanian representative, his plant-like form trembling with what might have been fear or fascination. "Why hide your true nature for so long?" "Because we hoped it would never be necessary to reveal it," the president replied, simply. "Humanity prefers cooperation to conflict, trade to conquest, diplomacy to destruction. But we learned long ago that peace can only be maintained by those strong enough to enforce it." She gestured to the holographic displays showing human military installations now scattered throughout the galaxy. The Void Hunter threat has been eliminated, but the conditions that allowed it to flourish remain: weak enforcement of civilian protection laws, inadequate patrol coverage in border regions, and a general unwillingness to confront aggressive species with meaningful consequences. President Gray's voice took on a harder edge. "That ends now. Earth will be taking a more active role in galactic security to ensure that what happened to Eden's Rest never happens again. We will continue to work within coalition frameworks wherever possible, but we will not allow bureaucratic delays to endanger innocent lives." Zarathiel felt compelled to speak, despite her growing unease. "President Gray, the Silvermoon Confederation has always respected humanity's contributions to the coalition. We want to continue working together for the benefit of all species." The human leader turned her attention to the Elven ambassador with what might have been approval. "We appreciate that, Ambassador Zarathiel. Your delegation was one of the few that voted for intervention when our people were attacked. Such principled stands are noted and remembered." The unspoken implication was clear. Humanity kept very detailed records of who could be trusted and who could not. The session continued for several more hours, as delegates asked careful questions about the new reality they found themselves in. The Crystalline Assembly wanted to know if their territory would be affected by human security operations. The Saurian Empire attempted to negotiate mutual defense agreements. The Depths Dwellers offered to share their own intelligence networks in exchange for protection guarantees. Through it all, President Gray and Ambassador Carter answered questions with professional courtesy, while making it absolutely clear that humanity would no longer accept the status quo. The galaxy's most dangerous predators had stopped pretending to be sheep, and everyone would have to adjust accordingly. When the session finally ended, Zarathiel approached the human delegation table where Carter was gathering her materials. The two women had worked together on several minor trade agreements over the years, and the elf hoped their previous relationship might allow for a more candid conversation. "Helen," she said quietly, "can I ask you something in private?" The human diplomat looked up with a slight smile. "Of course, Zarathiel. What's on your mind?" "Are we safe? I mean, species like mine who supported intervention. Are we going to be treated as allies or just another potential threat to be monitored?" Carter's expression softened slightly, showing the first genuine emotion Zarathiel had seen from any human official in months. "Zarathiel, you voted to help when our children were being tortured. You called for justice when everyone else offered excuses. Do you really think we would forget something like that? The elf felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. I had hoped not, but after everything we've learned about human capabilities, I wanted to be sure. The Silver Moon Confederation has always been an honorable ally, Carter replied. That won't change, but I want you to understand something important. The humans you've been dealing with for the past century, the peaceful diplomats and researchers, those weren't masks we were wearing. That's who we really are when we're allowed to be. She gestured toward the holographic displays that still showed human military installations. This is who we become when someone forces us to be. The galaxy chose which version of humanity it wanted to deal with when it decided that our children's lives were acceptable casualties for political convenience. Zarathiel nodded slowly, finally understanding the full scope of what had changed. So this is permanent. Humanity won't be going back to the way things were. No, Carter confirmed. We tried being the quiet species that contributed just enough to earn our place at the table. We tried trusting others to protect the innocent and maintain justice. That experiment failed catastrophically. The ambassador stood and extended her hand to the elf in the traditional human gesture of respect. But we're still the same species that prefers cooperation to conflict. We're just no longer willing to let that preference be mistaken for weakness. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, conversations were already beginning about how to adapt to the new galactic order. Trade agreements would need to be renegotiated, military alliances would require reassessment, and everyone would have to get used to the idea that the species they had dismissed as harmless builders was now the dominant military power in known space. In her private quarters that night, Zarathiel composed a message to the Silver Moon High Council summarizing the day's events. She ended her report with a personal observation that would be quoted in diplomatic schools for generations to come. We have learned that humanity's greatest weapon was never their technology or their military strength. It was their ability to make everyone believe they were harmless while secretly becoming powerful enough to reshape the galaxy according to their principles. Now that the facade is gone, we must all decide whether we want to live in a universe governed by human concepts of justice and mercy, or discover what happens to those who oppose them. The choice, she realized, had already been made for them 6 months ago when the coalition voted to abandon 50,000 innocents to their fate. Everything since then had simply been humanity explaining the consequences of that decision. And across the galaxy, species that had once mocked human weakness now went to sleep wondering what other surprises the quiet giants might be hiding in the darkness between stars.